All right, so in this lecture, we're going to be talking about shadows, okay? How they work, how they function, what types of shadows there are. So I have this sketch that I've started painting a little bit, and I'm going to show you the two types of shadows that you're mostly going to encounter, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new layer, and we're going to set this layer to multiply, and we actually want to make sure it's on top of our color layer. Now, your assignment is going to take this image and add the shadows. You don't need to add the highlights or textures or anything else. All you're going to do is add the shadows using both cast shadows and form shadows, which we're about to go over. So I'm going to pick a light blue color for our shadows, and I'm going to use just a regular old round brush as well. And you can use whatever you'd like. But let's talk about the two types. So the first type we're going to talk about is called cast shadow. Now, cast shadow is like when you're outside and you can see the shadow on the ground in front of you because it's being cast, the sun's behind you and it's hitting your body, and that's casting a shadow onto the ground. That's called a cast shadow. A form shadow is when you take a picture of somebody and the part of their face that's not being hit by the sun, as it turns away from that, it goes into shadow. That's a form shadow. So let's draw this, for example. Cast shadow would be like here on his forearm. His forearm, if the lighting, let's make that a little bit lighter actually. If the lighting is coming from somewhere to the top left, then it's going to be casting a shadow onto his body from his forearm. Okay? That's a cast shadow. So you can see that. Now, something to keep in mind is that the further away an object is from this object it's casting the shadow onto, the softer the edge of that shadow is going to be. If it's really close to what it's casting the shadow onto, that shadow edge is going to be really crisp. Also, to take into account is that the stronger the light source, the crisper the shadow will be, but the softer the light source, the softer the shadow will be. So if you're outside in a bright sunny day, your shadow is going to be really sharp and really defined. And if you put your hand right up close to the sidewalk, it'll be extremely crisp, as opposed to if you're standing up and the tip of your head on the shadow is going to be a little bit blurrier than, say, down by your feet. Okay? If you're on a cloudy day, then you might not have a shadow at all, or if you do, it's going to be really soft around the edges. That's a cast shadow there. Let's add some more here. His jaw probably is going to be casting a shadow down onto his neck. Okay? So something about like that. And you know what? I'm going to select the shape so we're not accidentally painting outside the lines here. It'll be something about like this. Okay? So you're going to go through and paint this whole thing using just the shadows. No highlights or anything like that. And you only have to do one layer. You don't have to go super crazy with it. Okay? His horn back here, it's pretty subtle if you can tell, but it'll be casting a shadow down onto his neck. Okay? Let's see. There's probably doesn't look like there's a ton on this one, which is fine. Let's do the form shadows now. So a form shadow is going to be something that defines the form of the object that the shadow is on. So for a shoulder blade right here, for example, the farther it turns away from the sun, the less light it's going to get. But as it comes closer, that shadow is going to fade and hit the light source and create sort of this effect, right? Same with this forearm here. The side that's facing away from the light is going to be in shadow, and the edge of it's going to come up and blend in because his arm is sort of like a cylinder shape. Okay? This part on his face, right? Some of these bone structures here will have form shadows as they sort of blend away, right? His horn on his head. Okay? This part of his skull will blend in with the shadow inside of his eye socket. Okay? And you're just going to go through this whole image and do that. Okay? So his neck, we can throw some form shadow on there. And then back here as well. All right. So hopefully you can see there the difference between these two, right? So we'll say there would be a form shadow down here where his muscle meets his forearm from his shoulder, his bicep. Okay, let's do this back leg. We can put some shadow down here. So this is all going to fall into shadow. He's got this big muscle shape here. And that'll probably even be casting a shadow down here onto his leg. So you have a nice crisp line there. Okay, you can see what I mean, right? That totally defines the form when we add those lines there, those values. We can tell there's muscle, right? We can tell all sorts of shapes from that. Okay, so sometimes cast shadows and form shadows will overlap, creating different edges. So a good example of this would be this cast shadow from his elbow is going to overlap with a form shadow coming up from his belly, right? So it's just going to end up blending into one shadow there. Or underneath here on his chest, this is going to blend up and soften, but it's also going to blend with this other form shadow up here to get that effect. Okay. So do this whole thing, pick a light source, and something else to keep in mind when you're painting. Let's make a new layer here so I can describe this easier. When you're painting, you need to make sure you're thinking about where your light source is coming from, okay? If you have, let's say, in this painting, the light source looks like it's coming from roughly something about like this, right? Okay, which, I mean, we don't have any lighting or anything, we just have the shadows, but you can tell it's something about like that, okay? Which means your shadows are going to be the opposite direction of that from whatever the form is, right? So if the light is coming from here, then the shadow is going to be directly from here, okay? If the light were to be coming from below, then everything on top would be in shadow, or if it was coming from the side, everything on the right side would be in shadow, right? So make sure you're thinking deliberately about your light source so that all your lighting can be consistent. You're not just guessing, and throwing stuff around, okay? So that's it for this lecture. Go ahead and post your assignment once you're done in the Facebook group or in the Q&A section, and this resource will be downloadable for you to access. That's it for this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next one.